Hello and welcome to B&E Now, a podcast about independent game development. I'm your host, Tobiah Marks, and with me today is Michael Todd.
Hi, I'm Michael Todd.
So, why do you make games, Michael?
I make games like it's a bad habit. I've been making games since I was 7. I made board games. Remember the first one that was super complicated I made was with 4 chessboards and a blanket over 2 chairs, and I was simulating fog of war by yelling out battleship-like coordinates on the chessboards so the other player on the other side of the blanket could remove or change the pieces over there because I didn't have a computer and I really wanted to play Age of Empires.
That's really cool.
So I've just been making games for as long as I can remember. More recently, I've been doing Unity for 3 or 4 years, and I've been running my own company, Michael Todd Games, for about 5 years.
So, let's start at the beginning. You're about 18. What are you doing then? Are you going to college? Are you just starting off and making games?
So I was making games as a teenager, and when I was 17, I decided to do games full-time. But I'd been a traveling juggler for the few years before that. I'm a homeschooler. I never went to school. I dropped out of kindergarten, and
Yay, homeschoolers.
yeah, exactly. Tobiah here being another homeschooler.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'd been making a decent amount of money as a traveling juggler, performing at various fairs and festivals, and I decided to use that money and either go to circus school or move into making games full time. And I decided that out of the 2 careers, I'd rather do game design.
The other one seems more profitable. There's a little more stability in games.
Yeah, games was an exploding market. I mean, especially back then. That was when I was 17, so that was 10 years ago. And, the indie scene has exploded over the last 10 years.
Indie scene aside, just gaming in general was already dominating media then. I think, I don't know when we overcame movies as the most profitable.
I think that was Doom, wasn't it?
For individual game, it was a while ago, but overall as an industry, I forgot what year we reached that milestone where we're making more money input than Hollywood is.
Yeah, but it definitely happened in the last 10, 15 years, and circus is a dying art. Circus, like Cirque du Soleil, dominates more and more of the market share because they use television to reach larger and larger audiences. And so before television, there were a lot of circuses that all traveled and serviced each small town one at a time. And so basically, circus being a dying art and computer games being an exploding art, I moved into games. And
it makes sense because you might first think that those are 2 completely different fields, but they're all about entertaining people and bringing joy and telling a story, sharing an experience. So they definitely have a lot of similarities. I can see that.
Yeah, and actually the similarity that appealed to my personality was juggling requires constant practice. A magic trick that you know really well, you should practice once in a while to keep it up, but juggling requires that you do an hour of juggling every day. If you're a professional level juggler, you have to do a lot of juggling. And programming was the same sort of thing. Like, to build something took a massive amount of work, so I'd have to really use willpower to work. And I found I really was, even at that young age, kind of a workaholic. So that was the reason those 2 things stood out above the others, that I felt really good to master them slowly over time. And so I moved more and more into programming.
So when did you start getting distributing your games in mass to the public? Not just making it for your friends or making it for your family or your social circle.
I really wanted to, but making and finishing games is incredibly hard.
Yeah, the finishing part is it's really easy to start making a game.
Oh, hundreds.
That finishing part is what kills most developers.
So I ended up finishing my very first game, Puzzle Wizard, which was a terrible, terrible game that was about pushing blocks around. And I sold it to, I think, 15 people. And then I worked for another year trying various projects and so forth and ran out of savings and went and got a job mopping floors and serving coffee. And during the weekends and evenings, I built a game called Engine of War. And Engine of War was my first hit. It overall made about $80,000 and allowed me to quit the coffee job and do game dev.
That's awesome. Where were you distributed? Just on the website?
The internet. I took out ads on Linux programmer forums because it was a very, very detailed game where you could build an electronic circuit and then use the resulting weapon to shoot zombies. So it appealed to programmers. So I took out ads
very
and targeted.
Specific audience, but an audience willing to pay.
Yeah, I remember targeting webcomics about really nerdy topics, and then And then also a publisher in Russia decided to do a Russian translation, and that was very good, and that made me a few other.
Oh yeah, because definitely there's a large programming community in Russia, so that makes sense.
Yeah, one of the fans. So one of the things about the game, it taught me that really nerdy niche games create really insane super fans.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was an agent who talked to me about this publisher, and he convinced the publisher to do this. Like he loved this game like crazy. I had about 50 fans that were just like populating a forum with screenshots. I had no way to share content, and they came up with ways to share content. They found ways of combining parts in the game to create other parts that I didn't even know existed. Like they broke the game in interesting ways. And then I basically bummed around doing contract work and making several smaller games that didn't really hit. They made some money. They added to my rent savings pool. But I pretty much lived like a student for a couple of years.
My apologies for
No worries.
not muting my phone.
I'll just skip back a point. You can edit that chunk out.
Nah. I'll go live to tape. Continue talking.
Quality. You heard it here, folks.
Yes.
Yeah, anyway, so then more recently I made a game called Electronic Superjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of hit me at a point in my life where everything had come together. I'd been doing games for 8 years when I started, and I had my pipeline, I had my skill set, I had my group of friends, a lot of whom were game designers, and it really all kind of clicked together, and I made this game, and it took me a year, and then it took another year of constant updates and marketing and patches and all this stuff.
Were you in all yourself, or were you working with other people?
So I started the game by myself, and then a couple of months later, I decided I wanted to hire someone. So I hired a friend of mine who was working at Staples, and I basically said, look, I'll match your Staples wage if you can make levels for me. And she was like, yeah, fuck yeah, that's awesome. And so Cassie Chu joined the team, and together we built Electronic Superjoy. And towards the end, we came out in August. So in June, I scoped up drastically. I went to, I think, 8 people, and it was just because of deadlines, and I needed more programmers. I couldn't do marketing and business and fix all of the bugs.
Because the amount of work
Yeah.
scaled up, but you're just still one person.
Yeah, and I couldn't not market, and I couldn't not fix bugs.
And you're able to afford this because of your previous games.
Nope. I blew $100,000 of savings, which was from my previous games.
Yeah.
And I went $87,000 in debt in order to finish the game.
Wow, that's an intense amount of debt.
That's an intense amount of debt. And
I mean, like actually, I say that, but really, it's not. If you think about like how much big AAA games cost, that's nothing.
from a games perspective, it's nothing. But from a small business perspective, as a sole proprietor, it was my credit personally, not the company.
Yeah.
I couldn't have declared bankruptcy without that bankruptcy following me for a while. I know I pulled 16-hour days towards the end because it was do or die. It was totally like I was just not sleeping. I was sleeping at the office. And in the end, the game made, we're coming up on $500,000.
Awesome.
It's a lot of that went to pay back the cost, the huge amount of loans, the employees. 8 employees do not come cheap. That sucked up a lot of money. But all in all, I've been sending out royalty checks to everybody involved, and we're all very happy, and we're all moving on and working on other projects now.
Well, so tell me about like the success curve of that, because obviously it didn't make $500,000 in the first month. A lot of indies will think like,
first
they go
month
big
it
in
made
debt, and then
$2,000.
yeah. Okay.
And the reason
That's
it came
actually
out in
not bad,
June
too, for a first month.
I released a public beta, which you could buy into for, I think, $4 in June, because I didn't have enough money to pay rent. I'd maxed out the loans I had currently available. I later managed to get
does
some
that
funding.
$4 give them the full version later, or is it just
Yep.
for? Oh yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Okay.
So buy in early. That's about half price of what the total game was going to be. And I didn't have enough to make rent. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm either canceling this entire project, declaring bankruptcy, and finding a job, or we're going to release right now. So we released right now. And it came out, and I made just enough for rent. And then the next month, I made just enough for rent again. And
Talk about motivation to finish. Too.
yeah, tell me about it. And also, all the employees are booking hours, and it's just like money is like liquid in my fingers and it's just vanishing. I'm maxing out my credit cards. And then over time, it started popping up on various sites. And over time, it took insane amounts. In the month of August alone, I know for a fact I wrote over 2,000 emails to press. And every single one of those was handwritten. I used to research
no
a
form
journalist.
letter, copy paste kind of stuff.
Yeah, I actually forced myself not to copy paste, but to retype, so that it would be subtly different every time. Because I felt like journalists can smell a form letter. They must get thousands a day.
They must, right? I mean, that's what they get.
So I just would research a journalist and read some of their articles or watch some of their Let's Play, and then I would email them. And I'd be like, oh, I see you play Binding of Isaac. I made an indie game. Maybe you'd be interested.
So you were full-time focused on promoting the game?
Yeah, for at least 2 months.
Were you promoting it before this beta came out, or?
Yeah, we went to PAX in early 2013, and we went to a bunch of other conferences. We went to MagFest. We went to anywhere we could, honestly, and that cost money. Going to a place and flying the team in and hiring a booth was it's thousands of dollars, which I didn't have because I'm flying around on maxed out credit cards. So, yeah, talk about your motivation to finish. I'm never going that far into debt again, but it worked out in the end. Yeah, we went to everything. We went to every tiny little part of. We went to Winnipeg Comic-Con, I think. Like just anything we could go to.
I mean, there was a lot of different factors there to your success, but I think bottom line is that you kept working at it. You kept personally being in charge of it. Too many indies just kind of say, "Oh, I did this. I'm deserve success now. I wrote 1,000 emails. I deserve success now."
Yeah,
it's
you
not
gotta
about
write 2,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Honestly, if I hadn't had debt and a team depending on me, because of course the other thing about canceling the project is I have to tell 8 people they've just lost their jobs. If I hadn't had that, after an opening month of $2,000, I would have canned it. I would have just said I would have, been depressed and not continued. But I continued and continued and continued until eventually we got in a Thanksgiving sale and I bundled it, and then we went on a Christmas sale, and it started going up, and over time it started making acceptable money, and now it's tailed off because these games work with spikes. But
yeah, and now you got the sequel out.
But it got Cassie Chu her first job in the industry, and she got a successful start in the industry, and she's now working on a level pack coming out soon for Electronic Superjoy called Hot Sticky Mess.
Awesome.
And it allowed me to move down here to Mountain View, California, where I'm recording this. And all in all, it was just an amazing experience.
So what was the target audience of the game? Is it still that hardcore players?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So the target audience was super hardcore players because that's what I was. And I basically started the prototype going, you know what I really want to make? I want to make this. And I'd only recently discovered platformers, and this was my first platformer. I'd been programming RTSs and puzzle games up until this point, but I played platformers. And all my friends were, showing me their games, and their games were platformers. So I wanted to build one, and so there's a arcade cabinet in the game N+. The creators of it, in their condo, have an arcade cabinet that has N+ on it. And for about an hour, I held the top score on it, above the creators of the people who made N+, until Reagan kind of, rolled up his sleeves and crushed my score. But
nice. That's good bragging rights.
Yeah, but there's some bragging rights there, and I showed him the prototype for Electronic Superjoy, and he liked it, and I decided to make the levels just brutally hard, and we succeeded.
But that kind of goes against a lot of conventional designs. A lot of people talk about, you got to make your games as accessible as possible, but accessible doesn't necessarily mean easy. Doesn't mean hold everyone's hand and make it so that a 2-year-old can get through it.
Yeah, I tried to do that in some areas. Like Electronic Superjoy has very few menus. I feel like if you're cutting people out for reasons that you don't care about, do you know what I mean? You don't want people to drop because they got confused on your menu. You don't care about your menu. But if they drop because of your gameplay, and we have a high drop on the first 2 levels because people go, oh wow, this game is hard, and give up. But
I will admit I'm one of those people.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
horrible
totally
at
fair.
platforms. Like, I love Super Meat Boy, but I've not cut it past the beginning
I'm
of it.
stuck on level 18 of that, I think.
Yeah.
Honestly, the hardcore people were the reason I finished it as well, because I started getting on Twitch and getting on YouTube, and the community for those games is amazing because they're so incredibly, I want to say passionate, but that's used too much these days. They're insane. They're just like, they want more content. They are drooling for more content. They will, email you up. They'll come to your house and say, "Why aren't you building more levels?" So my next game is actually a procedurally generated game that I'm going to build over time. And the reason for that is once I'd made Electronic Superjoy and sold it to this amazing community, and they all owned it, the way to make money, the way to make rent, was to go talk to people who don't own it. And that meant not actually talking with the existing community, because the people who really love it all own it. Of course they do. One guy bought 50 copies. But
50, just gave it to all his friends?
Yeah, he gave it to everybody he knew. But I wanted to basically hang out with them on Twitch channels, and I found that my job, in order to pay rent, I had to go hang out with people who were inherently getting less and less enthused about the game as I was going further and further afield. So my next game is going to be a game where it's about, making more content for the existing game. It's going to be procedurally generated, similar to Binding of Isaac or Nuclear Throne, and my whole job for the next 3 years should be making more content and hanging out more on Twitch and watching more YouTube videos.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about, I need a new level pack. I don't need to actually lay all this stuff out.
Well, making a level pack for ESJ takes months, and people consume it in hours. And it's not a sustainable system.
That's exactly what we ran into with Blast Monkeys, where we had this game going, we had this community growing, and we were updating every 2 weeks, until the point where we stopped doing that. And then, that's when our income started to have a tail, because...
In 2 weeks... People probably didn't take 2 weeks to beat the content, did they?
It would hours. Hours after new content come out, they'd be great. Please release more.
Yeah.
And it would take us, all this time of constantly working to be able to get out, 30 levels a month.
Same in everything. It's like writing. Everybody wanted J.K. Rowling to release the next Harry Potter 3 weeks after she released the last one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it had to be 2 years because it takes a long time to produce content. So procedural generation allows people to replay content in interesting ways. The other side is the game is completely moddable. The game comes with a level editor and a monster editor and a monster subpart editor and a graphics pixel art editor, and it's just going to have every editor I can cram in there so you can make your own content. So I'll be spending most of the next few years making editors.
That kind of reminded me, I having not seen the game and not knowing what it's like, Jason Roher's game, what's it, Inside a Star-Filled Sky, or what's the name of that game?
I think I know the one you're talking about. Is that the one where you go down layers?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can go into an enemy, and it's another platformer or a top-down shooter game that determines how the enemy behaves in the world above. So is it kind of like that, where people are kind of going into those systems, or it's more editor-y, where in the game versus they're in the editor?
The game structure is directly inspired by Binding of Isaac. So there's a room with monsters in it, and then when you move to the next room, there's more monsters in it, or possibly a treasure chest, and eventually there's a boss. The editors are taking on all sorts of different forms, but they're in the meta menu. They're not in game, but they're in the game. If you buy the game, you get the editors.
Yeah, it's part of the package.
I used to spend a lot of time with the Civ 2 world editor. You could draw. They had a pixel editor.
I remember that.
I didn't know how to use any tools except that, but I figured it out, and I made a really shitty Star Wars mod, and I must have been 10.
Nice.
And StarCraft 2, or StarCraft... TOO. StarCraft as well. I used to spend a lot of time in the editor making all sorts of use map settings maps, and it really helped me become a game designer. And I really am excited to make this game for a generation of teenagers. I don't want to make this game for as large or as old an audience as ESJ was. This game is for people who want to mod like crazy, like the modding community.
I mean, and there's so many games that do that now, and they're trying to tap into this Minecraft formula by allowing for creativity. And they think that means literally having destructible blocks. And the core of the reason why that catches on is that, as I just said, creativity. It's a game that it just feels like, oh, someone creative made this, but I feel creative by
ownership
playing with it.
Yeah, you get ownership of it.
Tony Hawk did that for me. I spent so many hours making Tony Hawk levels.
Yeah.
And that, the original Pro Skater, what was that, PS2 back in the day. And all you're doing is just laying out a skate park. But I would spend hours and hours laying out skate parks just for me to enjoy.
Yeah. Any game that had a level editor, we ended up consuming in one way or another. Far Cry 2 had a level editor. And we would make tons of Far Cry 2 level editor. And it's because it was just really simple. And we learned Hammer for Half-Life, and we made custom Half-Life levels. And that was actually a real problem when designing it. So I do this thing when I design where I come up with a core concept. That's essentially what other people would call the game idea. But I then riff off of it in 100 different directions. So I'm like, I think about, oh, what if I do this game as a multiplayer game from the start? Or what if it's an MMO? Or what if it's, and then I drag myself back and I go, okay, so what if it was like mobile and super single player? And that explores the idea space of the core idea really well. And so one of the things as I hit upon is I really want to mod this. I want to have 50 included editors. You should be able to press play and play the core game and have the whole story arc there, but you can also go and make your own total conversion mods. And the problem with that was a financial one. How do you sell this game as its primary method of making money, but also have it accessible to all the teenagers out there who are out on summer break? They play RuneScape because there's a free version.
Your core audience of people who have hours to sink in, because they don't have money. But they're creating content for people who have money, who would be willing to pay and then get all that free content.
So it was the wrong model. So I decided, like Electronic Superjoy, I have a standing offer. If you send me an email and you say you don't have a credit card, or you're too young, or your mom won't let you buy it, or you live in another country that doesn't have access to the right payment systems or whatever, I just send you a free key. I've sent out thousands of free keys. Because if you want to play the game, that's cool. I don't really want to be the jackass saying, no, give me
actively
$10.
Reaching out to you, because that person's going to convince someone else to check out the game.
And I'm sure there's a few people who've like cheated me that way, but I've also, there's whole schools that have played it now. There's Turkish classrooms that like have all played Electronic Superjoy because they, as a group, the whole classroom wrote me an email and asked for keys. And they asked for like one key that they could install on one of their computers so they could share it. And I sent them, I think, 200 keys or something. And nice. They shared it with everybody. And so now there's a whole bunch of people in Turkey playing Electronic Superjoy. And that's super positive and super, good. Why would I restrict that for the sake of $10?
No, it just seems like good business to not do that.
So Angelo, a mutual friend of ours, suggested something. He said, just do it the Facebook way. Just make it free. Just hand it out to everybody and worry about monetizing it later. You know what I mean? Just get the audience, get the people in, get the modders, get the procedural generation, and keep it free. Just make it free.
There's an argument there, because if you have people regularly using something, making money with that is a solvable problem. But you do want to have some forethought of what direction you're going to want to go. Like, is it extra content? Is it extra editors? Is it extra something?
I feel like there's 2 or 3 ways I can go that won't be super painful later. Like there are ways where later on I could be like, hey, everybody, I'm going to change the monetization system and everybody's going to groan. But I feel like I can sell like gold memberships, which unlock access for like $10 to a bunch of other editors, or pro versions of the editors, or underlying source code, that kind of thing. And that I feel could work. The other thing is I could, create a section of content that the editors can't create and basically sell hats. And I could do ads. All of those work as a monetization if you've got the audience. But I think the core thing is I want, as my day-to-day life, interacting with the Twitch crowd and the YouTube Let's Players and my fans and making content for them. Like, there are parts in Electronic Superjoy and the sequel Groove City where I was literally playing the prototype on some Twitch stream and someone suggested something and I changed the level like that because that was a good suggestion. And there are hundreds of parts like that. There are monsters in there that someone said, hey, what if this happened? I can't even take full credit for the game because the community, like, I'd be arrogant to say I'm just, I just think of an idea and then make it and it's good. You've got to interact with the community.
We live in such a cool time where development in public is not only possible,
but
practical. Like,
it's insane.
So many people are like, oh, I have this idea. You can't let this see it because you're going to steal it. Like, no, let everyone see it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
The earlier you get feedback on it, the better.
I also really want to play this game I'm talking about. So if somebody else can make it before me, that's cool because I'll continue making mine and we'll be competitors, but I'll probably play yours if you finish first. You know what I mean? I'll be playing yours.
Not really competitors in the games industry. Because it's like, if we're making apps, like if we're making the calendar app, I'm only going to have one calendar to-do list app on my phone or on my desktop. But if we're making a game, all gamers have multiple games. Yeah. There's very few games that take away from another game.
Yeah, just because I'm making a procedurally generated roguelike, I don't think people are going to stop playing Binding of Isaac or not buy Nuclear Throne or one of 100 others.
Yeah.
I just,
I think
yeah.
the special thing about MMOs is that they will. Like, you generally only have one MMO subscription.
I think that's because
and that
of
makes
the
them kind of
subscription
unique.
model.
Yeah, it's a subscription model. It's part of that. Okay, I'm only going to pay a monthly fee for one of these, and they're all huge time sink, and I can only afford one. Which one do I go in?
Yeah.
And
it's an interesting mentality. Like, I think there are other time sinks, but I think it's the financial thing. It's the structure of, I can't afford to belong to this many monthly things, even if they are all cool.
People will have WoW subscriptions and then also play free-to-play MMOs every now and then with their friends because they don't have that pay commitment.
They play League of Legends, which is just as easily a time commitment. But
yeah, absolutely.
It's when I feel like paying for money, I can.
Yeah, well,
but if I don't have extra money, I don't.
Weird monetization system where it's not bad, but they're clearly going for super small percentages, and they're okay with that because they have so many, as you were describing, just fanatic players that even though they're making a very small percentage, return on investment, whatever you want to call it, consumer lifetime value of each user is really low. There's so many that they got more money in the bank than they know what to do with practically.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my game's ever going to hit that audience, which means from a practical point of view, in order to pay rent, I need to have a system that I can actually make money off of. Otherwise, the game grinds to a halt and I can't pay rent and I have to get a job. So I will probably go with something along the lines of selling new content or a Prime membership because their system targets such a small percentage of their audience that you need to have their audience to make their money. And I'm an indie developer. If I hit, that's wonderful. But if I don't hit, I still want to be able to pay rent. You know.
And the nice thing about indie space too is that you're allowed to iterate. You're allowed to release one way and then change it to another way.
Yeah.
Because hey, if it's not popular one way, just change it. You don't have to be married to an idea for 18 months.
Yeah. I feel as long as people can still make mods. Like, I'm kind of loath to charge for the editors. I'd like those to be free.
No, it sounds pretty like core to the idea you're pitching and core to the idea you want. So definitely you want as many of your players as possible to get in on that.
Yeah. I feel like, and that's the other thing I'm experiencing. Electronic Superjoy was a classic game that you build and then you launch and then you're done, right? You patch and you update, but you don't actually make more game. Whereas I've been doing an update every day for a week or two, and it's just like, hey, everybody, here's this feature. By the way, the save file's broken, so don't save it. Just play around in it, but don't save your work. And then the next day, I'm like, oh, I fixed the save file, so you can save stuff now. And it's just, it doesn't ever need to stop. It doesn't need to have a particular line in the sand where it says, oh, you've gotten really good at making content, and you've got all your pipelines set up, so stop making it because you're done. Like, that's what it feels like at the end of development. When you finally have all your problems solved, then you launch the game, and then you're what? Supposed to just start again? So this is
I keep
ongoing.
telling people games are a service industry now. You can't think of
They're
them as
moving to it,
products. If you make a product, you release it, maybe you have the 1.1, you just cycle. That still exists, but that's going away. Where the real money's at, where the real successful businesses are, that especially from an indie space, is having games as a service industry where you're continually updating it, you're continually pushing new content, you're continually working on it.
Indies have been surviving off of the fact that they're small. So they are small numbers of people, which means they have personality. They're not huge faceless corporations. You have personality as an indie. You can have fans who actually know you, who actually like you, who actually hang out with you on Facebook. Whereas it's hard to hang out with Microsoft on Facebook, right? Yeah. So that, as a games as a service thing, works really well because I have people tweeting at me going, "Hey, can I play Electronic Superjoy on the Android?" And I say, "Well, it's not out yet, but here's a link to the APK. Install it on your phone," and I can just do that because I'm
beta tester
I'm
right there.
the company, right?
Yeah. If it doesn't work, he's more likely to get back to you and not say, "Oh man, this Android version sucks," and say, "Oh hey, it's not working on my phone because X, Y, Z reasons. Go fix this."
So I really enjoyed that part of it when I was launching Electronic Superjoy. So why not make that my daily life, where I sign on in the evening to the Twitch channels and they're playing my game and I'm just lurking in the back of the channel watching, and noticing as they screw up on bugs, and noticing as something that's balanced too hard defeats them 800 times, and they eventually beat it, and I make a little note to go nerf that, and all of that.
So who else are you working on with this project?
So this project's just me right now. Angelo's helping with a few things, like he wants to make it multiplayer, and I'm trying to keep it single player for now. He's a genius network engineer, so everything is. His hammer is multiplayer, and everything's a nail.
He happens to be working on a multiplayer title right now.
Yeah, the multiplayer on that is
insane.
insane. His game, Candy Cave, which is out on iOS and Android, you can have it on an Android phone and then on a different version of iOS on a different network, but nearby. And you go into the world and you see the guy who's on the other platform, other version, other phone in the world next to you, and you can trade items with him and talk and wave and hug. And it's just like, what? How does that even work? I tried to play Space Team, and there was 4 or 5 of us, and we couldn't play it in groups of larger than 2 because everybody had different types of phones, different versions, different operating systems.
It is a
they were on the network or the guest network.
Task to overcome.
Yeah,
he did it all in Unity too, which is really awesome.
So Angelo's been helping with a lot of things. He's been helping me. He taught me how to use JSON files to do save file stuff, and he set me up with a script. The game, the editors, you'll be able to press save to server, and it will upload to my server, which means anybody else who's playing the game can access your content, which means someone can draw a really cool character and just save it. And then someone else can come along and go, oh, okay, I'm going to use these graphics and put them into a total conversion mod and draw like background graphics to match them, and then hook up custom bullet patterns for the monsters. So it can be, you can do community effort stuff as well.
Awesome.
But no, it's just me right now, so it's going to go slow, one day at a time, one update at a time.
Not trying to put any deadlines on yourself or say
totally not going to put any deadlines on myself.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You're also working on a YouTube channel you want to talk about.
Yeah, so I've recently started a YouTube channel with my friend Randy Ornstein in Toronto. So when I lived in Toronto, Randy and I started a local community event called Skill Swap. And the concept was we had all these friends we wanted to teach us cool things. So we basically got a classroom at the local college after hours, and we said, hey, Jim, hey, Droken, hey, Alex, hey, Damien, come teach us for an hour your skills that you're really good at. And a bunch of other people started showing up, and it's become like 800 to 1,000 people show up. At some of the bigger events, we have just insane amounts of Facebook members.
Amount of people.
We have, I mean, on off weeks during, non-summer and during job hours and stuff, we have much smaller audiences that actually show up. But there's just an insane amount of community in Toronto, and SkillSwap's growing really popular. But to access, for example, Damien's level design tutorial, which happened a year ago, you require a time machine, and you need to be in Toronto on Friday night a year ago. So it's bullshit. There's an insane amount of amazing information that's just been lost because if you weren't there, you didn't experience it. So we're going to start a version of it that happens on YouTube. It's just going to be game devs talking into their webcam for 5, 10, 15 minutes and talking about not basic stuff. They're going to talk about advanced level design. They're going to talk about this really specific thing, how they were inspired by the tutorial in Super Meat Boy to make less text in their tutorial for their racing game. It can be as specific as you want. It can be brain patterns that this designer uses, how they filter this, their workflow, because there's a million basic tutorials out there. There are a ton of 101 basic level design. Hey, you should make your level flow. Hey, you should make your objectives clear. But there are almost none, and I mean almost none, that are advanced level design. And this is complete bullshit. And it's because it's subjective. It's because it's an expert topic that is subjective and everybody does it differently.
And the big AAA companies, they consider that proprietary. And so like, should we release this information?
Yeah, so it's bullshit. So I happen to have a bunch of friends who are all really, really good game designers, and I'm going to Shanghai each and every one of them to talk into their webcam and give tutorials on something they're good at. And that's going to launch later this month, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll include a link at the bottom of the show notes for it.
We should do that.
All right, wrap it up. What advice would you give yourself starting out in this journey? Like rewind back, you're 17, you're like, I'm going to quit this juggling thing and get into games. I can give you that time machine you were talking about, but you can only get 30 seconds to say yourself something.
Make really, really tiny games really, really fast and finish almost all of them.
Good advice, good advice. I always like to wrap up the shows talking about games we've been playing lately, not just games making. I've been pulling out my PS Vita, the console that isn't doing so well. I have like 3 games for it. And one of them is Virtue's Last Reward, which I've been getting through very, very slowly. Like it's been taking me like a year and a half, I think, get through this game, and I'm still not through it. But it's this really interesting Japanese visual novel, and it's really good. Like I would recommend it to a bunch of people, except for the fact that what makes it good in large part is the writing and story, and you won't get any of it unless you had played the predecessor for DS. So it's like
you have to go
hey,
get a
DS. Yeah, exactly. To play this awesome game, you have to get a different device, a different game that is worse. Like it's not technically as good. It's slower to get through. It takes a while to get through. It's not a quick game.
Talk about your niche
get through
audience.
all of that, and then you get. Well, it didn't sell very well for that very reason. There's a huge community to trying to get like a third version out because I haven't gone to the end, but apparently there's a cliffhanger that will make me very sad.
That's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I mean, it has an ending as far as it actually has like 8 or 9 different endings, but
interactive fiction.
This story is not over, and they called it a trilogy because they planned for a third one, but I don't know if it'll ever happen.
It always sucks when you know the TV show is going to be canceled and they're talking about cliffhangers and you're just like, no, don't cliffhanger it.
Yeah.
Give us an ending, please. I want to move on.
Well, they thought they would invest it in. It'd be huge and it'd be like a early Vita title, and didn't take off. I think it's actually also on 3DS now too. So
they need to port it to Steam. They need to port both to Steam and sell them as a package.
Yeah, it would sell crazy well on Steam because now there's visual novels on Steam.
Yeah.
And before they were like, are these really games? I would add them, and then they just finally got over that and let more than just analog.
Yeah, Steam's doing some good things. They're doing a couple of bad things, but they're really doing a lot of good things with Steam. I'm really liking where they're going. I've recently been playing a lot of Binding of Isaac, which may or may not have directly affected my designing a Binding of Isaac-like game. I do that. When I play a lot of a game, I'm like, well, okay, I want to make like this game, but different here, here, and here, because I don't like this part here, here, here. And so I end up just making the game. If there's a decent level editor, I'll go play around in that. But I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna just,
But it's exactly why I bring this up in the show, because you're inspired by the other games that you play, and that's what
it
gets
affects
you
you.
interested.
You need to be careful what you play. Actually, don't play RTSs when I'm building an RTS because I'll go through a down part in work, like where work is really slow, and then if I'm playing RTSs and I have games I'm going to load, it uses up some of the same juice, like some of your excitement for that genre. So I tend to play platformers while I'm building RTSs, and RTSs while I'm building platformers, and that kind of thing.
Interesting. You don't find it valuable to be able to like reference that weird sub menu system in Civilization and go, oh, they did that in a really good solution, or oh man, they did that horribly, I'm going to make this better.
Totally. I research it, and I do that during work hours, and I do it for shorter amounts of time, and I go through and I look at the
not just
menus.
like casually sitting back and playing.
Not like blowing 20 hours in Civ
and
then saying, oh, that was research. And I mean, I've been a gamer for a long time, so generally I can, I've played hundreds of hours into the game before I start being so inspired by it that I need to make something like this. And that's, so I definitely played a lot of platformers and looked for how they solved problems when I was building Electronic Superjoy, but I was mostly playing Mount & Blade and Company of Heroes and a variety of other games when I had time, because I was doing 16-hour days towards the end.
So then now you switch to a more RTS game, then your next one's going to be a platformer again, and you go back and forth.
That's happened. Yeah, I was playing a lot of platformers.
It's not a bad thing at all. That's actually a good strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
If you want to find more about the show, you can go to beindynow.com, where we have past episodes, show notes, all that cool stuff. If you want to find more about me, you can go to my blog, tobiahmarks.com, where I have interesting articles for indie devs, tutorials, cool stuff like that, resource links. Where can we find more about Michael Todd Games?
Well, you can find more at michaeltoddgames.com or michaeltoddgames.tumblr.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at The Game Designer.
That is like one of the best Twitter handles ever. It's like, The Game Designer. Not a game designer, the game designer.
I was young when I got that, and Twitter had just come out, and I also have it for Hotmail, Gmail, Skype, a bunch of other places.
Nice.
And it was just because I was the game designer out of the group of like 6 people I hung out with. But now I'm on Twitter and I'm the game designer, so it's lovely. You can also, so basically if you go to any one of those sites, it links you to everything else. You can find out more about Electronic Superjoy at electronicsuperjoy.com. And the SkillSwap online YouTube video will be linked to below because I don't actually know the URL off the top of my head.
Not at time of recording, at least.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you again for being on the show. And
Yes.
for everyone else out there,
Very
go
cool
out
chatting.
and make some games.
Yeah. Make games, guys.